month check-in with my book journal. I typically do like 2 check-ins in a month in my book journal. So I do one kind of halfway through the month to keep track of the books I've read so far and get sort of my fresher thoughts on them. And then I do one at the end of the month. So typically after the month is over, in the first few days of the next month. So like for this month, for example, I'd be doing it April 1st or within the first few days of April to set up the next month and what I'm wanting to do for the next month, and then also kind of get my final conclusions for the month. So how much I read, everything like that. But so for this video, we're focusing kind of on my first half of reading for the month of March. So then the first book I have here, it's Hexed. It's the last book in the Never After series by Emily McIntyre, which is just a bunch of dark remixing of fairy tales. So this one was focusing on the story of Ariel, if you can tell by my water. A lot of the times I feel like the ways I visually make my book journals doesn't necessarily relate the most to like the actual vibes of the book, but it shows a lot of what helps me remember what it's about. So this book didn't really like focus a lot on water or being obviously being mermaids, because it's taking these fairy tale stories and making them into like a more modern day existence of them. So this was kind of a like mafia version of the story of Ariel, Eric, and Ursula. So in this book, Enzo is who traditionally would be Eric, Aria is Ariel, and then Vanessa is the Vanessa Ursula character. And so it is Vanessa and Aria are related. They're part of a within the same kind of not gang, but it's the group which is run by the lineage of Vanessa and Aria. And then Enzo is he's a different mafioso member of the New York area. And so it starts out just explaining how Vanessa, Enzo, and Aria come to meet and kind of stumbling upon Enzo. And then the story mainly starts to take place where Enzo and Aria are going back to Aria's hometown to get prepared for getting married because they're engaged, and getting ready to kind of create a combination business venture for both of the gangs. And that's mainly the premise of where everything gets set up. And I won't really go too much in depth with the story in case you do want to read it. Obviously, if you're watching my video, there's quite a bit of spoilers in the writing of my book journal. So like what I actually write down. If you're wanting to read any of the books that I'm reviewing, maybe don't read what I'm saying. And there's a lot of my feelings that get put on these pages. In general, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I feel like that's a pretty average rating for the other books of the series too, from this series. I wasn't expecting it to like it as much, since it was the story of the Little Mermaid. I've never really been that interested in the story of the Little Mermaid, and I liked the music of the Disney Little Mermaid, but the plot didn't ever really get me, and I never really liked the premise of mermaids anyways. So I wasn't really going into this expecting to like it much. I was actually really surprised by how good it was. I probably would have rated it closer to a 5-star if it wasn't for the ending. And if you read it, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying. But the ending left me feeling really annoyed, because it was just like, oh, this bad thing happened, okay, it's gone, and then the end. And it just seemed so rushed and weird, and like not really acknowledging like who the person was or anything, or the importance of it. And it made me really upset, because it just kind of seemed like pointless, you know? Without that, I think I would have really liked the rest of the book. and I would have rated it probably closer to a 5 stars. Also, if you're watching this, you might notice that like the way I'm writing looks really awkward, and that's not the way I actually write. It is very awkward. I didn't have like a proper table, and the first way that I set up my camera, it looked really it was really hard for me to write in, but I ended up figuring it out and fixing it later. But like, if you just keep watching how I do this single journal, it looks super wonky, and it's because it is. It was really hard to like position my hand in the right way and not have it be like too out of the way. So yeah, just disregard that. I was having issues, but it's all fixed now. So now I'm creating my spread for A Touch of Chaos. It's the last book in the Hades Persephone series by Scarlett St. Clair. I have really enjoyed this series. I think there's been a lot of points throughout of it that I was really frustrated with kind of how oblivious the Hades and Persephone character were. And they repeatedly were having issues where they were like, oh, we're going to fix this, we're going to talk better, and then would immediately completely disregard that and not talk to each other. And it was really frustrating because it's like, why do you keep saying you're going to do this and then you immediately don't do this? Or there's a bunch of different parts where Persephone makes these realizations and then proceeds to not act on any of them. But once the series started to move away from their romance and kind of focus more on the world and kind of the conflict in the world, I started to really like the series more. And so this book was kind of focusing on the conflict between demigods and the gods. And I really enjoyed getting the combination of Persephone, Hades, Dionysus, and Theseus. I really enjoyed getting a lot of Dionysus's POVs. And I obviously hated Theseus's POVs. If you have read the book, you would understand why, but he is horrible. The only thing I think I would have really preferred to see more from this is to have been able to flesh out Dionysus's point of view. I really got to enjoy his perspective and his storyline. And by the end of it, I didn't really feel like I had gotten to experience enough. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know how his romance planned out more. I'm going to start somewhat talking in spoilers. So if you haven't read it and you would like to, just skip past this point. But one of the things I was really surprised about was when I would look up online about this book, there was a lot of people who were really upset about the pregnancy epilogue and her being pregnant. In my opinion, it was really predictable that that would happen. Obviously, if you know the Hades Persephone mythos, it's part of the mythology. But then during the book writing, it talks about how Persephone kills the one person and then gains the black thread from ending life. And right when I saw that in the book, I was like, oh, okay, she's gonna get pregnant. Like, this is the way that they get pregnant. That makes so much sense. Because Hades has made the previous deal where you can't have kids, blah, blah, blah. So for me, it was like, it wasn't something where it's like, oh, and magically, happily ever after, we're gonna have a baby. It was explained and foreshadowed within the writing. So yeah, but that's something that I know a lot of people were upset by. Okay, so now we're moving on to the book. It's called Dumbledore, The Life and Lies of Hogwarts' Renowned Headmaster. I am hoping to read the Harry Potter series soon. It's been ages, like since I was in high school, since I've read it, but I'm wanting to reread them again. And I saw this book and I was like, oh, that'd be really interesting to read and kind of like have in the back of my mind when going forward to read the actual series. Because I read it when I was so much younger, I didn't look at things very like analytically, and when I was reading things for pleasure, I wasn't as good as paying attention to like foreshadowing or any sort of reference and understanding of like behind the scenes workings. So it was really interesting getting to read this book and see how much people were able to kind of interpret from the whole series and take away from Rowling's like interviews or things that she's posted. I found this really enlightening to read, like before going into the series again, because it explained so much that when I've just read it really offhandedly before, I never would have interpreted it that way. And I didn't have the understanding that this author had about everything that was going on. And I'm really looking forward to reading the series now, having this understanding of everything and kind of having this different perspective on Dumbledore than I did previously, and seeing him as much more of a flawed character than I was aware of previously. And so I'm really excited to be able to notice all of these small details now going into the book. I rated it a 5 out of 5. I found it really interesting. So on this page, I'm trying to draw 2 different boxes. I typically end up reading series, but every now and then I'll read like a single one-off book, or I'll read just like the first book of a series when I do these check-ins and not the whole series. Because a lot of the times, especially if I'm listening to audiobooks, if I find a series that I'm interested in, I'll just blast out the whole series. But so this one, I had this one single book that I hadn't finished the rest of the series yet, but I wanted to add it to here when I was reading it, and it is Speak of the Demon from the Deals with Demons series by Stacia Stark. I have very mixed feelings about this book. I ended up rating it 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I did continue to read the whole entire series. So it's mainly because the concept of the book is really good. I really enjoy the premise of it, and like the lore of the area, the lore of the realm, the history of all the magic, the interaction with the different factions of magic. But the plot itself was very lackluster. I wasn't really enthused by the plot. So the main character is Danica, and she is a detective, and she ends up, lots of stuff happens, and then along the way she ends up making a deal with Samael, a demon. And so she ends up getting marked by him, and all sorts of things proceed to happen from there, blah, blah, blah. And it just, because she's a detective and she's investigating things, I love mysteries. But for some reason, the way she investigates things and the way she interacts was just not there for me. It wasn't that interesting, but the lore of the book was so interesting to me, and the way it ended, I had to figure out what was happening now, and then I had to read more. And so it becomes so intense at the end and makes you want to read more, or at least it did for me. So I had to read the rest of the series. But the first book definitely is not something that like I would recommend. In general, if anyone is like a reader like me, I think you probably would not enjoy it. But if you can like tough through not very great books to get payoff by really intricate and unique lore, you might enjoy it. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't recommend it to other people. So these next 2 books, I've been reading the Throne of Glass series for the first time, and it's one of my coworkers' favorite series. So I already knew I was going to read the series, but then she's been really invested in my experience of the series. And it was so funny because I'm a very quick reader, and when I like read something that I find really interesting, I'll devour like a 600-page book in a few hours. So that's like what my coworker's knowledge of like my reading habits has been. So she was like, oh, you're gonna like devour this series in like a week. It's gonna be great. And I did like the first 2-3 books, The Assassin's Blade, Crown of Midnight, The Throne of Glass. I read them so fast. I really loved them. I didn't find them super interesting. Like it was definitely more slow paced than I expected. But I knew that it was going to get better. Like I knew the plot was going to pick up and I knew it was going to be really interesting. And then I sobbed my eyes out in Assassin's Blade because everything was making me cry. And then it was making me cry thinking of how these were related to the plots in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. And so then I was just like crying because I knew what things meant now. But then when I started Heir of Fire, I started the book. I was all excited to read it. And then I got to the point where Selena meets Rowan and they're traveling in the woods, and I stopped. And then I like didn't pick up the book for like 3 weeks. I was only like 60 pages in, 70 pages in, I don't know. And I didn't pick the book up for weeks. And every day I'd come to work and my coworker was like, how's it going? Like, have you read more? And I'd always be like, nope, I just cannot pick it up. It's not because I don't like the book. I just like do not have a desire to pick up the book. I like the story. I know I want to read the story. I know who Rowan is. Like I know there's going to be that romance, and I just cannot pick up the book for whatever fucking reason. And so that was like every couple days she'd ask, did you pick it up yet? And never I did. And so it just kind of became like, am I ever going to read the book? Like, is it ever going to happen? And finally, one weekend, I went, I'm picking it up. I'm going to read it. And I devoured it in a few hours. I loved this book. It was so good. I have a feeling probably like all of the books of this series I'm going to think are so good because I'm a sucker for kind of callbacks and a lot of foreshadowing and a lot of like visual foreshadowing. I really loved that in the ACOTAR series, and I know I'm going to enjoy it because I know I love her writing style. But yeah, I was having a great time. The whole angst with Aelin and Rowan, I was dying for. I really loved their companionship and how they kind of grew to care for one another, and realizing that like who they assumed the other was at first isn't actually who they are, and kind of realizing the things that each other has gone through and really valuing each other because of that. I loved it. And then getting to go and see things from what's going on with Manon, that was so interesting. Initially, like early on in the book, I really was not interested by her POV, but the longer that I was reading and the more I was exposed to it, it quickly became like one of my favorites. So yeah, it was amazing. And so then once I finished reading Heir of Fire, I had to keep reading Queen of Shadows, and I devoured Queen of Shadows in the same night that I finished Heir of Fire. So I was having a blast. I was just absolutely devastated. It was the whole entire book, everything, just so much kept happening, and it just kept wrecking me over and over again. All of the POVs from Dorian were breaking my heart, and it was just devastating. That is just the word for it, devastating. And then when the book first started and it was Aelin leaving Rowan, I was so annoyed because I was like, you're gonna get me all invested in this relationship, friendship, whatever they have, and then you're gonna tell me that he's not even gonna be in this book. Are you kidding me? And so then when they have their big reunion, I was like kicking my feet like a little girl. I was so excited. I was so happy. It was just great. I loved it. when she was just running into his arms, dead. I loved it. It was so good. Initially, too, Kale, at the beginning, he really annoyed me. I really loved his character so far, and then at the beginning of this book, I was just like, why are you being like this? There's, like, I understand you're pissy, I understand you're annoyed, but, like, it just felt too much. But throughout the book, he really did redeem himself. But there were quite a few points where his loyalty and defiance of, like, what needed to happen definitely made me want to throttle him. And then Manon, with her whole plot with her and the 13 leading Kaltain, again, devastating. Throughout this whole entire book, there were so many different points where, like, a single sentence would be said and I would just cry. Which, like, I've definitely gotten more emotional as I've gotten older, but, like, yeah, that had me crying so often. Like, just the point where it was like Aelin started wearing Rowan's shirt instead of Sam's. It, like, I was crying because I was like, oh, she's healing. She's, like, healing and growing to care for Rowan and allowing herself to, like, not get over Sam, but, like, accept this place where it is that he's passed, and she's allowed to kind of move on and have happiness. And then when they were able to finally visit Sam's grave, again, I was crying. Then when everything was happening with Lysandra and her kind of, like, getting to reveal who she truly is and explaining more of her background, and Aelin just giving a chance to, like, understand who this person is that she had such a distaste for. I was crying the whole time. And when she was talking about how she cleared Evangeline's debts, gave her a home, like, made her be safe, again, I'm blubbering like a baby. I literally, like, this book was just, I swear it was, like, just made to pull at all of the little things that would make me cry. Oh, and then the end, when the king was revealing he was also inhabited and, like, trying to fight the Valgs, I don't know how you say it. It, like, totally reshaped the context of everything he had done previously. And that's one of the things I love about Moss's writing, is, like, just simple things like that, where it's like a person's behavior is completely changed later on when you understand the actual reasoning behind it, and it makes so much sense. And it doesn't, like, completely reshape the behavior that was done initially, but it, like, it gets you to understand it in a completely different context. And I just love it. I love her writing. Like, the way he reacted and all of his choices, it's just great. Obviously, yeah, you can see me saying wow, wow, wow. Yeah, I love this book. I'm very eager to continue the series, and I just know this series is absolutely gonna wreck me, and I'm gonna be crying. And I think maybe that's, like, one of the reasons why I wasn't super eager to keep reading, because I'm like, okay, well, this is Rowan. I know it's where I'm gonna just, this is where everything's gonna get emotional and I'm gonna start crying. Okay, well, that was it for kind of like my mid-month recap. So then we're gonna go through, there's my Hex, Touch of Chaos, and then moving on to the Dumbledore, Speak of the Demon, and then Air of Fire and Queen of Shadows. So yes, we will pick up at the end of the month.